Well, hello everyone. This is part 2 of how to make a 50s dress. I think it turned out beautiful. I can't wait for you to see the rest of the video. Step 10. Pin and sew the shoulders. The back should be a little bit bigger than the front. That's because our shoulders are naturally rounded because we bend forward more than we bend back as humans. And again, be sure to pin at the intersections to make sure that everything is lined up. And then I always like to pin kind of like top, bottom, middle. You'll notice as the video progresses that tends to be my pattern for just about every seam. What I'm doing here is called finger pressing. It's a method of keeping your seams flat before you get to the iron. And don't forget to clip your threads. Step 11, iron your shoulder seams. Step 12, pin your shoulder sleeve in. I always start at that middle notch. If you haven't already marked it, you can find it on your pattern and just relay it on the sleeve that you've already cut out. Pin in that intersection and also go through the seam on your shoulder seam. From there, I'm going to move into the armhole as I slowly move the fullness of the sleeve. So sleeves are convex and concave shapes. They don't really want to match up. And so this is why I'm slowly kind of, I say itsy bitsy spidering my hands over, trying to see, move one to the left, one to the right until everything looks a little bit even. By the time I got to the back of this bodice, I could tell that I was going to need to clip a little bit. So this is part of why it's really important to have that seam allowance line, so that way I don't clip into my actual garment fabric. It's good to go slow. I could tell by moving it back and forth that the bottom of this bell curve was really the point of contention, where the fabric was just like, no, we're not going to move. So here I am going a little bit here, a little bit there, pulling. You can see how it takes a minute to pull it all together, and that is just the nature of taking something that wants to be two-dimensional. So fabric is on a two-dimensional plane. It's woven with its warp and weft, and we are trying to force it to be three-dimensional, and it doesn't want to do that. So here again, I had to clip at the top of the bell to get it in, move a little here, move a little there, but it's worth taking the time, because when you get to sewing, you pretty much get to sew once, maybe just twice. 3 times is totally fine as well. Step 13, sew your sleeve in place. Be mindful of this curve and make sure that you have a really good back stitch. This is a pressure point. Because sleeves are curved, I tend to brush my hands a lot to move the fabric out of the way, stopping to put my hand underneath here, kind of like fluffing it up. The fabric is going to want to bunch. Again, it doesn't really want to be on a curve yet. That's part of why I iron so much, because the heat from the iron helps re-warp the fabrics into human shapes. Also, don't be afraid to add or subtract pins. Here, look, I get to the top of this bell curve and I didn't pin enough, or maybe my pins popped out. Who knows what happened? But because I'm going slowly and looking and adjusting, I can tell that I'm going to need more security going around this curve. So go slow, check, look. There's nothing wrong with stopping. If you need to pivot, which is where you leave your needle down, raise your presser foot, and turn your fabric. And don't forget to backstitch the end of your seam. It's really important, especially at these high pressure points. Step 14, iron. Can you tell I'm serious about ironing? It really makes your work look beautiful. Ironing this sleeve is going to be a little tricky. If you were in class last week, we talked a little bit about having a ham and a salami. I don't know why all the tailor ironing assists are named after meat, but I enjoy it. Step 15, match up your side seams. I, again, like to start in the middle. So once you've ironed your sleeve in, it should be very easy to match up your seam, make sure that you are not crossing over your seam allowance. That causes nothing but bunching and makes your sleeve harder to move and function for the person that's wearing your garment. I call this method of threading and knotting the needle the dirty swirl. The other way where you roll off your finger is called the dirty roll. So since this is swirling around the needle, I don't know, it makes sense to me. Anyways, I started using this during the pandemic because we're not allowed to lick our hands on set, and I had to figure out how can I thread a needle quickly on set with a mask. And at the very beginning, we used to have to wear gloves on set. So this is my dirty swirl. Now, step 16, go ahead and base stitch the front of your skirt, both sides. You're gonna need it. Oh, hello. How you doing there? You having fun? You made it this far in the video? Great. Let's put our skirt together. Step 17, pin your skirt back together. Make sure that you're pinning your right sides together, meaning the outside of the fabric. It can be kind of tricky using muslin to see what exactly is the right side, but think of the side of the fabric that you drew your lines on is now the inside, and the non-line side are the outside. Step 18, lay out your skirt back so that you can easily see where's your front, where are your sides, which side is inside, which side is outside. Match all of your notches and your stitching lines. This seam is slightly curved at the top because it is a hip curve. The curve is primarily on the front side of the skirt and not the back. So if you see a little bit of resistance, that's what you're looking at. It's another concave and convex curve. Step 19, match up the bodice center back with the skirt center back. From here, once again, I like to move from center back to side seams to center front, and then figure out the middle of that, the middle of this, the middle of the next one, as I'm slowly moving the fullness. Even though the skirt and the top have hard lines, hard boundaries, so that way you know exactly where they line up, I still find that this method keeps everything in alignment. Keep the line straight, just like when we're drafting, we want our lines to be straight. When we have our straight of grains and we are finding our center fronts, it's just really important to try to be as consistent as possible with sewing. There really is a methodology. There's a routine to sewing that you get in the habit of, just like driving a car. I think that's why I use car metaphors the most, because it feels almost like I'm driving a car. I've been sewing so long. And so when you're new to sewing, part of the awkwardness and the steep learning curve is that you have to learn what is the pattern of sewing. We pin in the middle, we pin out, we pin to the end. To the sleeve, when you're sewing it in, you're going to have to pause and move the fabric out of the way. This is a rather large skirt. It's even bigger than I realized. I made it much bigger and then I took it down and I thought, oh, this is a small skirt. And then as I kept sewing around this waist, I realized how big of a skirt it is, which is why I had a little reverse sewing, because I wasn't paying attention to some of the fullness and ended up catching a little bit of my own skirt. So one of our final steps, step 20, second to last step, is iron carefully. You really don't want to add in wrinkles that you don't need. While this video was sped up, I actually spent a lot of time ironing out all of the wrinkles that I ironed in to make sure that this dress just looked wonderful and that the muslin did exactly what we want it to do, which is almost be like paper, except not. And our final step, step 21, fold the center front line all the way from the bodice to the skirt on the right side of your garment. The old saying in sewing is that women are always right. So the right side of a woman's garment folds over, and that's how we remember it, and we don't think about the other side. And here's our final product. I think it looks great. This dress form is not the right size for this dress, but that's totally fine. This is the one that I had, and its job is to hold up our art, our creation, our mock-up, something that we learned hopefully a lot of new things on, learned some old stuff, got to practice and play, and most importantly, we learned that we can pretty much do anything we want to do, right? We can change the world through fashion design and style, and honoring who we are and making clothes that fit our bodies.